Welcome to Downloaded, the show where we gather the most opinionated voices in the tech field today and focus that energy on stories impacting the tech world. I'm your host today, Patrick Norton, filling in for Jim Louderback, who is off somewhere in a boat, somewhere in an ocean, and untrackable, not even by satellite. Joining me today, Dylan Tweney, the executive editor of VentureBeat.com, and Mike Elgan, tech writer for Computer World. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Are you guys excited this week? Or have you have you been overwhelmed between Microsoft, the NSA, and in the Apple case? Are you just done with news for the week?
Yes, yes, and yes. Absolutely.
It's always good when there's a lot of crazy stuff going on.
Well, I'm gonna dive right in, because every time I try to read the one mic, and I have it printed out in front of me, company realigns to enable innovation at greater speed and efficiency. So let me catch, in case you haven't been paying attention, you haven't been on Tech Meme, you've been on a boat with Louderback for the last week. So Microsoft Entertainment head Don Matrick leaves for the top role at Zynga last week. This week, the One Microsoft reorg, Ballmer's email, it makes my head hurt. Going forward, our strategy will focus on creating a family of devices and services for individuals and businesses that empower people around the globe, at home, at work, and on the go for the activities they value most. Entertainment is
now a lot of words.
It's a lot of fluff.
It was a really long memo, but it's this huge reorg of Microsoft into functional divisions.
Exactly,
right?
like Apple. It's yet another way that Microsoft's trying to be like Apple. And it's a good idea if Steve Jobs was running Microsoft, if you can imagine such a thought. But it's probably a lousy idea with Steve Ballmer running Microsoft. It gives a huge amount of power to Steve Ballmer.
In some ways it was inevitable, though, I think, because they really are recognizing that the old way of running Microsoft, where you've got the server division and the OS division and the Office division, that's not the way people think about the technology world anymore. It's like cloud and devices, right? And so the new Microsoft is aligned along those
That's right.
categories.
To me, I think, though, the problem is that the old divisions were great if they were allowed to compete against each other without any retribution, without any fear of doing that. But they weren't. And so every division was worried and had to play politics with what the other divisions would think. Now they're reorging along the lines of Apple, but they're not Apple. Apple has a tiny number of products, and their services play a totally different role than Microsoft services. So Microsoft is this gigantic company with lots and lots of products, lots and lots of partners. It's not Apple. But they're reorged in these four, functional groups, and they're trying to be Apple. And I don't really know, I really don't have a lot of confidence that Ballmer is the visionary to run a company with that much power.
Yeah. A lot of people have been saying things about Ballmer and sort of wondering how long he's going to last.
He has managed to last through years and years of incompetent leadership.
I was going to say, no one's figured out or even really attempted to drive Ballmer out of that position.
As far as I know, no. I mean, there's been no.
The shareholders haven't gone after him. No. There's no one who has any power internally who can take him. Bill's fixing the world.
He's totally hands off.
He has no interest in doing that. I mean, and it's funny, right? Because you look at this, like Julie Larson Green is now running hardware, entertainment, which is like games and any content generated by the game studios are essentially now under hardware. Operating system standalone, applications and services engineering group, cloud and enterprise engineering group. It seems like they've tried to make it flatter, but I don't think they've actually solved any of the issues.
No reorganization solves fundamental issues like this. I mean, the problem with Microsoft is they have the classic innovator's dilemma, which is that it's a massively profitable company on the basis of franchises that they've had for decades, which are not going away overnight, but which are slowly getting nibbled away at by cloud-based services and the whole mobile revolution. So Microsoft could cruise for years and still be making tons of money while slowly dying.
Yeah.
The problem is they have to figure out how to turn the entire ship around, right?
So they've never done a good job. Okay, let me rephrase that. They're finally starting to get to the point where it almost looks like they'll have consistent interfaces and consistent services across multiple devices. When you go from Windows Phone to the tablets, Surface RT just dropped, $150 to $350, and you expect a refresh on that. Windows 8, which is a bold statement that's going to get its ass kicked by Windows 8.1 when everybody deletes Metro and goes straight to the desktop. At this point, you were saying, they've never been allowed to compete with each other, and they've never really had a really good unifying strategy. Are they just going to? Is it possible to turn this ship?
The biggest threat, to, as far as I can tell, is there are certain aspects of Microsoft that are awesome.
Right.
Xbox is awesome. Their research division is awesome. And there are certain parts of Microsoft that are just bleeding. Like Bing is like financially, and that's one of the benefits for people within Microsoft who want to cover their butts.
Right.
Bing's problems are now buried in this divisional thing. But my fear is that everybody within the entertainment division will try to extract the magic Pixie does from Xbox and the successful areas, not just Xbox, but there's several areas, to the detriment of what's good about those things.
Right.
And so, there's the best case scenario is that the magic pixie dust infects the entire division and that becomes successful. But I think the opposite is more likely, actually.
I would say they have done some things well. You mentioned the Metro thing. Like, people have not embraced Metro as quickly as
it is a wonderful
as you might think.
interface.
Yes. But they will eventually. They're just, Microsoft tried to push people to that too quickly. Right. And the truth is, Microsoft has done a great job. In fact, they led the charge on this kind of whole flat, rectangular design, which Apple is now following, right? So they were there 2 years ago.
I disagree with you completely. I think they didn't push Metro hard enough or quickly enough. What Apple would do, what Apple has done, when Apple came out with a phone that didn't have any physical buttons, it's hard to remember now, but that was a radical thing to do, and that was a controversial thing to do, and everybody was whining about the fact that there was no keyboard, and how can I can't use this is terrible. And they didn't let anybody else make a keyboard. They didn't make a keyboard. They forced the world to embrace the new thing, and
that's much easier to do when you have no installed base, right? If you have 1 billion people around the world using your product one way, it's a lot harder to do that.
What they did, though, is what Apple did was they had OS 10 over here, and then they introduced an entirely new OS, and over time they're letting the one OS overtake the other, and that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
Microsoft should have done the same thing. They should have had one way, regular Windows, and then they should have the shiny new Metro-only version of Windows. And they also need to get busy with their big screen desktop touch displays. They own Perceptive Pixel. They have what used to be called Surface, now called Pixel Sense. They have most of the intellectual property and most of the best functioning hardware in that space. Get it onto the people's desks, get it into corporations, follow quickly by getting into the hands of consumers. We want big screen iPads, basically, with touchscreen. That's the future, whether anybody likes it or not. And Microsoft could own it, but they won't. They'll wait and wait and wait until they're late to the market.
As somebody who's been using a 27-inch Lenovo desktop with a touchscreen and Windows 8, the longer I own it, the less I actually use the touch interface.
Right.
I'm not sure how much the world really needs.
Because it's been slapped
screens
onto Windows. That's the whole problem. The future interface is not just Windows with a touchscreen on top. It's a combination of voice, in-the-air gestures, which Microsoft also has a huge lead in.
They have great technology for that.
I saw demos for incredible voice recognition in the 90s from Microsoft Labs. They should be unifying these into a completely pure user experience that does it all.
So you could get that today in Windows if you never went into the desktop world. But the problem is, you need apps to do that. You need a rich ecosystem of apps, and that's really where they haven't developed that enough.
Exactly. That's why they need to get started. Start at the high end, and then let it trickle down, as opposed to Apple's, start at the bottom and trickle up. But I mean, that's what a visionary does. They know what the future is, and they just make it happen.
So Windows Phone basically would be perfect if they just started it 5 years ago.
Exactly. Well, that same could be said of almost everything that they do.
But yeah, and it's funny, right? But you look at it's I keep thinking like Microsoft. It's always the 3.0 company, like Internet Explorer, Internet Explorer 2.0. That's not some bad ideas. Internet Explorer 3.0, boom.
So they're really good at iterating. That's the thing. Is you can you can say Microsoft makes stupid decisions again and again and again, but never count them out because
they always
will
fail
come back.
upwards.
They're like a zombie army. There's millions of Microsoft executives and developers, and they'll just keep iterating.
I think that's more true of a quality of product perspective as opposed to a market share perspective. Because if you look at Zune, you look at the phone, you look at all these kinds of things, Surface, these things, they get great. These products get really cool, but it doesn't matter because by the time they really perfect it, the world has moved on.
It's an interesting thought. They still own the desktop.
They out there.
It feels like there's still an opportunity for Android to stumble. I mean, when you're looking at 30% of your installed base being 4 to 6 iterations of the operating system behind what's available today, can any of it be fixed with Ballmer still running the company?
Sure it could. I mean, sure it could. I think that, I think...
That was not a strong... I just want to say, that was not your strongest reaction today.
It's Xbox has succeeded under Ballmer. I think that it could be called a success. It just depends on how much they let people within the company like really drive that thing. You know, anything is really possible. I'm pretty down on Ballmer. I've been calling for him to resign or be fired or something since I think for 5 years now. But I mean, it's a gigantic company with a lot of really smart people, and you know they could really turn it around. I just the history in the last 5-10 years leads me to believe they probably won't, but sure they could.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I'm in the next row of cubicles over from the games crew here at Revision 3, and and listening to the reactions to the Xbox One release, and then I'm like, don't worry, they'll get it together for E3, and then in E3 they just get stomped by the PlayStation presentations. I'm really curious to see how where Microsoft's going to be by the end of this year. I mean, it's been an unpleasant year for Microsoft.
Yeah, the Xbox One launch was an odd stumble for that division.
Yeah. Snowden NSA saga gets uglier for tech. Guardian publishes yesterday how Microsoft handed the NSA access to encrypted messages and storage and Skype. Essentially, the Guardian says Microsoft totally happy to hand over all the keys to secure services they're selling to the PRISM project, at which point they get merrily distributed in a cooperative effort of joy and love between the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI. I don't even know where to start with this. Hours later, the statement from Microsoft about response to government demands for consumer data, where essentially they say, we have to do this, we have no choice. We don't give blanket access to it. And the line, to be clear, Microsoft does not provide any government with blanket or direct access to SkyDrive, Outlook.com, Skype, or Microsoft product, which I'm just going to lay, I'm going to pretend I don't find the entire NSA, the NSA storing everything in Utah for later access, which creeps me out. At a deep, cellular level. I'm going to pretend that I'm going to try to be fair and balanced. I'm just going to try to be fair and balanced here. As members of the press, are we blowing this out of proportion?
Well, I think Microsoft's response was basically the same as what Facebook and Twitter
Google,
and Google all said, which is, look, we're required to cooperate with federal agencies to a certain extent. Yes, we do this. Some of them, are quite public about how many requests they get. Google's very good about publicizing that. Twitter and Facebook, not so much. But they all said, nobody has direct access to our servers. They do not have a direct pipeline into the live servers.
It just sounds like it when you look at the slides.
Right, so the conclusion you have to make is this. One, they're lying, and the NSA really does have a direct pipeline into their servers, and they can't say because they're under gag order, right? Or two, either the Guardian, which has led the reporting on this, or its sources misunderstand what direct access to the server means. Right. And there are in fact portals that law enforcement agencies can use to go. Facebook has a law enforcement portal. You can go to that portal, and with a single click, if you're an authorized law enforcement person, you can request data. Right. But that doesn't mean you get direct access to their servers. It means you get direct access to their legal department.
This word direct feels like a real fig leaf, and everybody's kind of using that kind of language. Why not just say access? I mean, you say direct. The reason the program is called PRISM is that data travels over fiber optics. It's light. It travels through glass. And so what a prism does is it takes that light and it bends it so that you have now going in two different directions. And that's how PRISM works. As I understand it, it connects where the service connects to grab traffic coming and going. That's not direct access. That's just tapping into, in the Cold War, the U.S. used to send submarines down into various seas, and they used to clamp these clamper things onto the undersea cables so that it could monitor Soviet transmissions and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't direct access to the Soviet phone system. That was indirect access, but gave them 100% of the calls. So what's the difference?
I don't know if they really do have even that level of access to the PRISM program. I think PRISM is one of these fancy government names. And in fact, the program's funding is just a few $1 million. That suggests that they don't have...
We don't know that either. We don't know anything. We do know that the NSA's budget is classified 100%.
Well, that's true. And it could be just the tip of the iceberg.
It could be anything. They have to say something. In their reports and stuff like that, and they're, the whole point of all this is secrecy and hiding things. They've got a gag order on everybody involved. The companies are bound by the same laws that apparently required them to give this non-direct access, bound them to not talk about it. And when they do talk about it, they have to get permission about what they say and how they say it. That's why they all sound the same, because it's the same group of lawyers consulting with the same government agencies about what kind of baloney can we say.
Now,
so we don't know anything.
We do know one thing. Whether they have direct access or not, whether they're tapping into those, the communications lines or not, they're collecting a ton of data. And they're building this enormous data center in Utah. It's going to employ thousands of people, and they will have petabytes of data that they will be able to mine and sift and check whenever they want. So, to me, that's the real issue, like whether or not, the company may say, we can give them direct access.
That's part of the real issue. The other part of the real issue that appears to be what's happening is the plan appears to be record everything,
as
and then sift through the metadata using big data techniques to find the guilty parties, take that metadata evidence to a secret judge, get permission to then go back into the recorded, preserved version from 2 years ago or whatever it was, and then you have irrefutable evidence of wrongdoing. This is exactly what the Fourth Amendment exists to prevent. You're not supposed to go on a fishing expedition, house to house, looking see what where the law may have been broken.
Do you have any rebels inside?
Yeah, exactly.
No. Thank you. Open the door. We're going to search for the rebels inside. What? It sounds. And it's kind of funny because it's like, my parents, to say reasonably conservative would be one of the gross understatements of the day for me. They're about as anti-terror, and pro sort of searching out terror as possible, and they're just like, they're doing what? With what? In perpetuity? I'm looking at this thinking like, okay, quantum computing in a reasonable way is coming online, which has the possibility of reducing the time to crack encryption, assuming, of course, as we're learning in some of these announcements, that there just aren't simply backdoors built into tools like Skype to make it super easy to access. It's encrypted for everybody but the NSA. Not that, by the way, I should say to some of the people I know in the NSA, I know you can crack my stuff. But now it seems like you can take all the time you need to crack all the stuff as you need to crack the stuff. That's a little frightening from just a, from a, you know what I mean? It's okay. So, I'm sensing that both of you are a little less than enthralled with the process.
Well, it's the lack of oversight that bothers me.
And in transparency. Yeah. I think that the real issue is that I don't think that people within the NSA or people in the CIA or people within the government are necessarily evil. They're genuinely, my belief is that for the most part, most of them are genuinely trying to protect, save American lives, protect American interests.
Yeah,
and if you let the police make all the rules that govern police work, we would have no Miranda, we'd have none of these things, these controls. But in almost every sphere of life, regardless of whether it's saving lives or whatever, we make trade-offs. We say, well, yeah, cars kill huge numbers of people, but we need cars, and so we have to find a balance between safety and using cars. They've exempted. It's not that they're exempted, or that we exempted them. They exempted themselves from that discussion, from having to balance. So there is no balance. They're just saying the only thing that matters is finding terrorists, and nothing else matters. Damaging the reputation of Silicon Valley globally. I mean, we talk a lot about the constitutional things which affect only Americans. How does the rest of the world feel? Everybody uses Facebook.
Well, Germany has effectively said, if you want to ensure privacy or the secrecy of your corporate data, do not use American IT products at this point. That's a pretty big statement.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, they have they have their own sort of IT industry they want to buoy and propel, but that's a pretty serious blanket indictment. We're like. Pfft.
Well, the Germans also have experience with an unchecked police state.
Yes, they do.
Right? So they know what happens when you have a police state that can collect information on anybody and everything and just stack it up. I mean, I think I'm with you, Mike, that the fact that this has happened with the fact that the NSA is collecting information is not by itself necessarily bad, right? Because we want to empower them to catch terrorists. But the problem the problem is that they're collecting so much, and there's so little. There's been zero discussion of this. It's been so extra legal. We just know from history that a police organization that has that much power and that much information will not limit themselves. They will not voluntarily limit themselves. So I'm worried about that. A little
oversight. And I'll deliver the terrorists, and we're good.
I'd be happy if the FISA court was more than just a rubber stamp. If they actually examined these requests and rejected more than 10 out of 20,000 requests that they've received so far,
That's
Exactly.
That's the whole makeup of the FISA system. I don't even want to get into right now because that's just deeply fascinating and slightly horrifying. Interesting reaction this week. Defcon organizers asked federal agents not to attend. If you're not familiar, Defcon is the punk kid brother of an event called Black Hat. Black Hat's one of the premier security gatherings in the United States. Attendees come from worldwide. Black Hat costs thousands of dollars. Defcon costs a couple hundred. Defcon's a little more festive, but it's also been a place where there's been an incredible overlap between people who are like, I'm a kid with pink hair and a cheap computer in my mom's bedroom, computing and doing amazing stuff, and people who are working for three-letter agencies, the United States military, all kind of coming together to share information and learn. And it's been interesting. Revelations about the scale of U.S. government spying meant emotions in the hacking world were running high, said organizers of the DEFCON convention. And as a result, federal agents should take a timeout from DEFCON this year, was the BBC line on it. And I've been to probably 7 or 8 DEFCONs. I have friends that work on all three sides of the fence in this. And this was fascinating to me because people get along. There's, outside of the occasional really upset response. Have you ever heard of Spot the Fed? One of the running things. If you've never heard of DEFCON, one thing to do is Spot the Fed, where they encourage you as an attendee to find somebody you think is a Fed. They're brought up in front of a panel. Usually a guy named Priest comes up and does a Q&A, and you try to figure out if they're a Fed. And if you spotted a Fed, you get a T-shirt. It's fun. Everybody really likes it. Right up to the point where somebody shouts out, are you a G7 or a G9 class? And the guy goes, that's none of your business. And then automatically we know he's a Fed because he actually knows about the payroll system for the federal government. But it's fascinating. This is probably the most agitated the hacker community's been in years about anything. People are upset. I mean, do you guys care? It's like, well, duh, they're upset. They're hackers. I mean,
well, I think a lot of it has to do with creating, preventing friction and/or violence, because these agencies are the sort of the bad guys right now in the public eye. But remember, they're spies. They will be there. And you simply will not be able to spot the Fed in this case.
I will say that the response or the statement from the organizer of DEF CON, this guy who goes by the name of Dark Tangent.
Nice guy, by the way.
Is he? Okay, I've never met him, but the statement was, it was very high and mighty. It was sort of like, our community is based on openness and trust and mutual respect. Said the guy who goes by a pseudonym and whose conference is all about sneaking into other people's computers.
Not all about sneaking into other people's computers. Also about,
I just have to say, there may be honor among thieves, but let's be clear here. They are pissed because they were, they were getting hacked into. Not the other way around, right?
You have all my data? You have all the calls I made with my ex-girlfriend last year?
That's right. I'm supposed to be doing that to you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't a dark tangent, but there's a hilarious internet meme where somebody is confronting Obama saying, my father said that you shouldn't. He said that you guys are hacking into us, and then Obama says, he's not your father. So, but it's a really fascinating thing, and the other thing that we haven't talked a lot about is that the kind of thing that the U.S. Spy agencies are doing and encryption agencies, if you want to call the NSA something like that, lots of countries it turns out are doing. It's one by one. The U.S. is probably doing it better and probably has more money being thrown at it than a lot of countries. But almost every country now is either cooperating with the NSA, doing a PRISM-like program of their own to a certain extent, or both. And so this is really a global issue, and it's just simply a reality of the fact that everything's being digitized, everything's online, big data is coming into its own and now being applied to surveillance and counterterrorism.
Yes.
And it's sort of a global trend. It's kind of like globalism itself. It's inexorable, and I think that we're going to have revelations all over the world for the next few years about things that people didn't know were happening.
One of the biggest success stories in the big data field right now is a company called Palantir, which sells its stuff to national, security agencies all over the world. That's where they make their money.
Yep.
So,
as a friend of mine pointed out, this kind of stuff is supposed to happen in China, not in the United States.
That's right.
Which I don't want to get into that tangent. Apple's ebook conspiracy judge says Apple conspired to restrain trade, raise prices on ebooks. Apple's going to appeal. They're going to lose because it's a pretty straight reading of the law. Do you think this is going to hurt Apple? Does Apple even care about the ebook business at this point?
I mean, we learned in this trial, actually, this week, that Apple's percentage of the ebook market is 20%. I think most people were estimating it was around 10 or below. And it turns out that they're doing better than anyone thought. I don't seem to see a lot of people buying Apple ebooks, but it must be happening because they have a pretty significant share of the market. But the larger issue is that, Apple, there was some conspiracy there, and the conspiracy around pricing is what hit them. Basically, the problem is that Amazon is trying to do exactly or similar to what Apple did with music prices and saying it's 99 cents no matter what the other deals are, no matter if we have to lose money, gain money, whatever, 99 cents. And that was, and now Amazon's doing that with $9.99 for books to a certain extent. And that's problematic because it takes control away from the publishers and it creates a monopolistic situation. I mean, Amazon, you'll see different numbers thrown around, and generally speaking, there are two numbers. One is the number of ebooks being consumed or read or downloaded or whatever. That's one number. Right. The other one is the business, how much money is being made on ebooks. When it comes to the money, Amazon is killing it. They are dominant in this area, like really dominant, like monopoly dominant. That's why it's sort of surreal that the government is sort of working together with Amazon to crack down on this company that has 20% share.
It's like the real monopoly's over here.
Exactly, and you talk about price
but they're
fixing.
pushing prices down.
Well, but that's the thing. But they're
Well,
essentially
now.
They're doing the market equivalent of price fixing. Because when you sell an ebook, it's because of the friction-free nature of the internet. When you sell an ebook at $9.99, that's the price. That's the maximum price that anybody can sell that ebook. So if Amazon buys a book from Simon & Schuster for $13 and sells it at $9.99, subsidizes it by selling all these other things they sell, or by having a very slim margins. Okay, so now a company over here that makes all of its money from buying books, they can't buy the $13 book and sell it at $9.99, so they got a business. That's exactly what's happening. Bookstores are going out of business, online, offline, print books. Amazon is cleaning house with its. Essentially, they would call it, in other circumstances, they would call it dumping.
Right.
Yep.
If you do it in another country and the price is different in your country than it is in the other country, that's dumping. But there are no real laws against dumping domestically, right? So Amazon is actually navigating its way through the laws and legally acquiring a monopoly, legally eliminating competitors.
But it's not a monopoly. It's a very effective, de facto control of the market, but without actually being a monopoly.
But what do you do? What do you do if you're trying to compete?
Apparently, you don't conspire about it, and you try to keep the prices low, and the DOJ doesn't come after you.
Well, that's clearly illegal, is to conspire to set prices, right? And I, if I'm not mistaken, this goes back to Steve Jobs, where he had personal meetings with publishers.
Right.
And in fact, I think that's completely consistent with Steve Jobs' character. I mean, this is a guy who would rent a different car every 6 months so that he wouldn't have to put a license plate on it.
Right.
He always felt like, laws were there to be gotten around if they were inconvenient to him. So, his motivation may have been good. In fact, the effect on the market may have been good, but it was still, as far as I can tell, clearly illegal.
Right. I mean, the problem really fundamentally is that Amazon has created a system where it's not possible for a publishing company to determine its own prices. There's no way for that to happen. And so, the Amazon model wins, Amazon wins, and everybody's supposed to just...
I will also say as a consumer...
And because they did it openly, it's not a problem. I mean...
I will also say as a consumer, I read a lot of ebooks and some print books too. And I've noticed lately I've been buying the ebook because it's cheaper, right? Exactly what you're saying, which is going to hurt the local bookstore and hurt the print publishers. But I will say I'm starting to have second thoughts about this, because when I buy an ebook, I don't really own it, right? Amazon could take it back at any time. I can't.
Amazon has taken things back.
They have in fact done this. I can't easily share it with my wife. If it's a book that I think my kids might be interested in some years, it's not going to be around on my shelf for my kids to read.
It's kind of nice. Disney took everything.
I might actually prefer to buy the print book if it costs a little bit more.
Amazon owns that too. And here's the problem with that there's been stories in the news recently that in the narrow markets where Amazon has pretty much eliminated almost all the competition, they're jacking up the prices.
Right. So that's how the monopoly works. It's cheaper now, but once everybody's gone.
What other benefit could there be to eliminating competitors? Why else would you lose money on sales other than to eliminate competitors? And this is, I think the problem is with the laws. The laws were not designed for ebooks. Or even print books. And so we need to revisit this whole question and make sure that there's a level playing field where there's lots of players and lots of competition, and one company can't just subsidize a monopoly in the market and just then raise prices.
Well, as a book lover, I support that idea.
Yeah. It's been exciting. We're going to run through some quick stories in our lightning round right now. Dropbox, basically, they're having their first sort of developer meeting. They're opening up their API. Their stated goal is that they want to replace the hard drive. Is this ludicrous for anybody to state?
Well, they're sort of the default file system for mobile devices for many people anyway, so why not?
I think it's the right strategy. I've been a cloud computing skeptic, and this is just looking at my personal experience for many years, very skeptical about it. And then I did this thing that I called the Google diet for 1 month, the month of May. I only used Google products. And I just wanted to mostly find out about Google, but then in doing that, I used a Pixel. And Pixel is a cloud-based device. And after a couple of weeks, I was hooked on cloud computing. It's a wonderful, wonderful model. Superior. We've got the bandwidth now. We've got the mechanisms in place. So things like Google Drive and Dropbox are actually fantastic alternatives to hard drives.
It's a great model as long as you don't do things like I do with my family, like drive into the Marin Headlands or go anywhere off of I-5 north of Sacramento, where all of a sudden cell signal cuts out and is incredibly unreliable. I've actually had a really funny argument with a GPS application developer who's like, no one goes out of range of cell phones. And I pulled up a map and I'm like, see all of this out of range, all of this out of range, all this. I'm like, that's 15 miles from where we're sitting. And he's like, that's ridiculous. I'm like, that's hills. That's sparsely populated.
We need Google
areas.
balloons in Silicon Valley.
Does that, to me, that may actually frighten me more than the NSA, is Google sort of secretly listening to packets and they're floating balloons above me. I don't know if you guys fans of XKCD?
Sure.
Look for the XKCD Google balloon.
The Google balloon cartoon? Okay, I'll look that up after you get off.
One more before we go. Apple to make a low-cost iPhone. Does anybody care at this point? I mean, obviously they have to do something if they want to increase their margins, but do they have to increase their percentage of the market share? Thank you. But everybody I know everybody I've read reports from who's making software on Android is like, we make no money here. I mean, does Apple care about the low end of the market, or is that just a nasty place they don't want to travel?
I'm a little confused by it, and the worst case scenario is that Apple is no longer a special company, and they're starting to think like every other company that they have competed against all this time, because Steve Jobs is gone, perhaps. And the best case scenario is they have a really good plan that we don't really understand. But the idea of having brightly colored, plastic-looking, cheap phones to gain market, why would anybody want more market share? If I could sell one product and make $1 billion from it, I'd rather do that than work so hard to make a bazillion products and make less money. They already have the sweet spot of the market. They're getting 70% of the profits in the industry, and they're doing that by not doing the market share game, by just going after market share. So I really don't understand the strategy. They must have some great idea if that is in fact what they are going to do, and I can't imagine what it is.
Well, they've as you observed, they've never played the market share game. They've always been after profit share, and they've done that very well. But in other lines, MacBooks and iPods and just off the top of my head, they've definitely approached they've segmented the market, and they've had sort of low, medium, high-end options. So why they wouldn't
What's
do that?
the low end on the MacBook? I mean, the low end is a fantastically hot, beautiful, perfectly engineered device.
It's low end for Apple hardware.
That's what I'm saying.
So I think that you may expect their low-end iPhone to be something similar. It's not going to be a free phone, or it won't compete on price with feature phones.
Right.
But
I mean, we've seen some weird pictures, some amateurish pictures of the casing and stuff, and that doesn't look very good to me. That looks kind of not good. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe those aren't real. Maybe those are, who knows what that is.
Right. Yet another strange cloning effort somewhere in China for a fake series of Apple stores. I think it's going to be interesting to see, because if you're in mobile, you're looking at Motorola, and obviously Nokia has to be like the ultimate cautionary tale of all time, where Nokia had all the phones and all of the market markets except for the United States and just got whipsawed into a corner when they didn't quite keep up to speed on smartphone evolution. I'm curious, Android, iPhone, your iPhone, experimenting with Android?
I'm iPhone moving to Android. And my Android, my Google diet convinced me that what I really want more than anything else in a phone is Google Now. And so I'm looking for a phone that will give me the best Google Now experience. And the Nexus was pretty close. I want a higher end phone. I want some more features than that. But that experience of being able to really constantly be in touch with Google Now blew me away.
Galaxy 4 maybe, or the new Moto X when it comes out. Although we haven't seen anything about that.
And you?
I'm an iPhone user now after a couple years of using solely Android phones and well, except briefly a Windows phone. And I've had my heart broken by phone after phone after phone. I've only had my iPhone for a few months now, and I expect it will break my heart soon too.
So you're basically just saying serial disappointment is your way.
I hate phones. I have an Android tablet that hasn't let me down yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one are you running?
Nexus 7.
Oh,
it's pretty good.
It's a great tablet. I'm an iPhone user. I pretty much have so much money tied up in software. I'll probably never move to Android, except that now I actually have an Android Galaxy Note 2. And every time I pick up my iPhone after using that, all I can think of is like, they need to make a bigger screen. Yeah. It's time, people.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have for this episode. I'd like to thank Dylan Tweney of VentureBeat.com and Mike Elgan of Computer World for joining me today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a wonderful discussion. If you got any questions, comments, or suggestions, post them below in the YouTube comments section. Until next time, you've been watching Downloaded. I'm Patrick Norton, in for Jim Louderback. He'll be back next week.